Good evening. Welcome to Lives of the Saints, episode 25. We're at another round thingy.
Yeah, another episode of the day.
30, 35. Yeah, it's good. Yeah. Jeremy and I were just talking about the fact that he's sick.
Yay.
Again.
Yeah.
He's
I have to say I'm sick so that I can be healed, right? Out of sickness comes healing. So I'm grateful for that.
Yeah. That's right. No, when you were talking about as Christians, how we approach sickness. There was a lady that I met in the parish that took me in as a catechumen, and hi, Cassandra, and she said she was working somewhere where she didn't want to be really, and it wasn't fun to be there, and was actually in a university, but not as a teacher, but as a someone working in administration. And I said to her, how are you managing? She said, Sherry, I've come to the conclusion this is unto my salvation. And she was dead serious about it.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, I'm stealing that. That's so good.
Yeah.
But I remember someone bringing to my attention once that it was during the pandemic, the lockdowns and everything. They read a piece from, and I'm trying to remember, for some reason I have Saint Ignatius in my mind, but I don't know if that's the right person. But they talk, it's a church history time period thing. There was some kind of a epidemic in the world at the time. I'm so bad with this stuff, Jeremy. I don't even.
That's okay.
Where
it happened several times. There's been Black Plague. This has been a problem.
Yeah. But anyway, all of the pagans this is in the context of how it was written up. All of the pagans left the city, and they threw out family members into the street who got sick. They didn't care for them, right?
Like the opposite of lockdown, right? The opposite of quarantine.
Yeah, and the Christians, they stayed and they looked after the sick, including like people that weren't part of their community.
Yeah.
And the way that he wrote it, it was just so moving. I had to cry when I read it for myself. And, he said, those who were caring for the sick would be next in the sick bed, and then the next would come along, and they just kept laying their lives down for each other. And they never let anyone die alone. Hi, Tim.
That's so beautiful.
And it was just, and especially at that time, because there were people who had to die alone. And that was one of the things that really, I couldn't imagine, like being alone.
Yeah. Dying alone would be rough.
Just brutal. Anyway.
Yeah, that happened to my father. Well, no, I take that back. Whoa. Okay, sorry. He went in the hospital, and then we were there with him when he passed. So forgive me. He like had a heart episode and was in critical condition, but we were with him in the hospital when he passed. So, but he was the last he was conscious. He was alone. Yeah. But I'm sure he was aware that we were there. So
I don't know if this
very
is
peacefully, which is a great blessing.
I'm wondering if this is too dark a topic, but one of the most how do I put this, impactful experiences I had was my husband's grandfather. He lived alone. He was 86 or something, 87 at the time. And he lived alone, and it was winter. And one of his grandchildren who lived nearby was checking on him every couple days. And he hadn't been for about 3 days, and he found him. He heated his house with wood. This is in Switzerland.
Mm.
And he found him by the wood stove. He was obviously filling up the wood stove when it happened, and he had had a stroke.
Mm.
And they didn't know how long he'd been laying there, but he was still alive. Anyway, we went right away, and he, you know, he wasn't in good shape. Like, he couldn't speak or anything, but he had his eyes open and he recognized us and things like that. Anyway, like, it was just a bizarre experience for me. I was young. I was just newly married. I was looking forward to my future, and I was watching someone meet their end.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
I'm a poet, so like I'm just
Yeah.
like I'm all in, right, when things are happening like that. So anyway, that's a nurse came. They didn't take him to a hospital. They kept him at home. A nurse came and she wanted to put diapers on him. And
Mm.
we were all in the room with him, and she just ripped off his sheet. He was completely naked, and I felt like I had been violated. Like
Yeah.
and I quickly left the room, and I could just see him realizing what his life was going to be like now, right?
Mm.
And he, after that, we all came back in, and my husband and I actually were going to a thing that night. So we left. We said we'd come back the next day. And that night he passed, but there was a family member there, and she said, essentially, he decided to die.
Yeah.
He was smiling. He was nodding. He couldn't speak. He was, people were holding his hand, and he was squeezing back. And then she said he looked up to the ceiling and died. But it was a decision.
Yeah.
On his
Yeah.
part.
Yeah. My grandpa did something similar.
Yeah.
And then there was a show when I was growing up called Northern Exposure about a doctor who was from Brooklyn, and his schooling had been paid for by this little, small town in Alaska. And in exchange for getting his medical school paid for, he had to promise to be the town doctor for some number of years, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's still an arrangement, but at that time it was, fairly common. And so anyway, he was moved to Alaska, and it's all the culture shock of, being a doctor from Brooklyn in a small Alaska town. And there was one episode about a woman who was just telling everybody, she was just going around saying goodbye to everyone, older lady. And they're like, where are you going? She's like, well, I'm going to be dying soon. And they're like, what? And she's like, yep, we're almost there. And, the doctor heard about it, and he went to her house and was doing all this, all the tests and all the diagnostics and all the,
Mm-hmm.
and everything's coming back fine, and he's just perplexed because he's like, why is she thinking she's going to die? Right. Like, everything's fine. Like, what's going on? And then she dies in the episode, a couple of days later. And he's like, nothing ever showed up. How did she
know?
How did she know?
Faint, Jeremy.
Yeah.
They know.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Often.
Yeah.
Like,
no, it was a really beautiful episode, though. It was really good.
Yeah. Well, I actually read that, I don't know if it was a thing Rupert Sheldrake talked about, or if it was actually something Rupert Sheldrake talked about, animals saying goodbye.
Mm.
And then it was a video, and then people wrote stories in the comment section, and they were so beautiful. Of their pets, elderly pets, coming, making like an unusual round to the whole family, and then passing in the night and things like that. Just so interesting.
Yeah.
But now we're going to hear about somebody who's raised the dead, as far as I know, right?
He's what? Sorry.
Has raised the dead.
As I believe that's true. Yes, I believe that's true. Yeah. I'm going to do my best to get through this. I'm sorry.
Oh,
Do have a cough drop in. I'm sorry that I have a cough drop. And if I have to cough, I will try to mute. I can't promise. So if you're in your headphones, I'm sorry ahead of time. I'm doing my best. But I really want to share the life of this saint. He has interceded in my life. He's interceded in the life of my godfather. My godfather had a really special experience with him that, it's his experience, so I don't really feel comfortable sharing it. But
okay. I was going to ask.
But I have actually been to the cathedral where Saint John Maximovitch is in state, and venerated his relics. You could still see him lying there. His body's incorrupt. So there's a tradition where you can write a letter to him and leave it there under his casket, and he reads all of the letters and intercedes for anyone who writes letters. So it's very, apparently, even when he was alive, he would receive so many letters that he tried to read all of them, but he would just bring them all to the altar and just put them on the altar, and he would weep while he was interceding for everyone who had written him a letter. And many people reported, like if one of his tears fell on their letter, they'd be healed. Right. Yeah. So anyway, there's a lot of great stories about Saint John Maximovitch. He's a very special saint, very recent saint. He was born in 1896 and he was canonized in 1994. Excuse me.
And when did he repose? Oh, Jeremy. I can read it if you want. Should I?
That might be better. I just realized I didn't take any cough medicine before I came out. So I'll send you the link, and then I will go get some cough medicine while you read it, and I'll come back.
Okay, why don't you juggle some balls first, and I'm gonna go get my reading glasses.
Oh, okay. I actually can juggle. Let's see if I have anything close by that I could juggle. I can do that. I'll see if I can juggle these cough drops. They're kind of small, but we'll see what we can do. Oh, they're too light. Maybe I'm just out of practice. Okay. Sorry. They're pretty light. They're hard to juggle. Hello. Yes, you guys all came to hear Lives of the Saints, and you get to see me juggle cough drops instead. Sherry just went to get her glasses, and I will mention one other thing we were talking about was how Christianity to me has been a great relief. As far as before I was Christian, I was very terrified of death, just absolutely terrified. And there's a really beautiful teaching that in Orthodoxy that God takes us at the best possible time for our salvation, when he can extend the most mercy to us. And when I learned that, my anxiety over dying went down drastically, because that was always my fear. My fear was I was going to die at some time when I was in the middle of some stupid thing, and God would just reach into my heart and pull out this dark black menace and hold it in front of me, and I'd be like, "You're right, Lord." And then he would hit the big button on his desk, and that would be the end, right? I mean, that was really, I'm making light of it, but that was really a deep fear of mine.
Yeah. Well, I think we all have that, a natural fear of dying. And
yeah,
if we're totally honest with ourselves, like, I don't know. I think I was just talking about this today in the voice chat on Discord about when the Roman centurion says that he believes, but asks Christ to help him in his unbelief.
Yeah, Lord, I believe, help my unbelief.
But
I say that prayer a lot. honestly.
Yeah, and Jesus attributes that whole interchange as faith.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm.
That's his faith, and so, like, my question is, well, what is it that he has faith in? You know, he he knows something, but he also knows that he doesn't know it. Right? Like he you know that feeling of,
Yes. Yeah. It's a
I don't know if
self-awareness.
I'm saying this properly, but anyway, it's do you know the saint who said that, Jeremy? What saint?
I'm looking that up. I'm trying to find that. I
I
don't
think
know off the top of my head. I will have to do a little research and get back to you on that.
Mhm. Okay. I'm not going to try to parse that statement from the centurion and Jesus's response. I'm just going to let it lay there. It's worth thinking about.
Yeah, no, well, it's the it's a I'm going to say, well, it's a different view than once saved, always saved.
Mhm.
And it's a different view than it's a separate view from being certain in our salvation, right? Like I think I think it's healthy to
Well, it's an
be
honest,
aware of your own sinfulness while at the same time trusting in God's mercifulness.
or your inability to really comprehend, like to really grasp, like what
Mm,
is, the question is like, what is his unbelief? His unbelief is essentially he's acknowledging the fact that this is not something he can like have knowledge of. Like he can't. I don't know. I'm failing. I'm failing big time. Trying to explain it.
okay, real quick. Oh, there is St. Ambrose of Optina says everyone is born at the time that is best suited for his salvation. But then St. Paisios is the one who says God allows us to die at the best possible moment for our salvation.
Saint Paisios.
Yep.
I still have
Every
to.
single person, this is consolation for both those who we love and those who pass. Anyway, yeah. So St. Paisios is the one who said we die at the best possible time for our salvation. So, okay. With that, I'm going to go grab my.
Well, if you just oh,
It's
you
more.
have to scroll actually. Okay,
I
so
sent you a link
you sent me a link. Oh, okay. Where did you send it? On the Discord?
in Discord. Okay, I'll tell you what. I'm going to wing it. I
No,
pray
go
for the
get.
intercession of the saints. Most Holy Saint John, please help me read your life. We're going to be okay. We're going to do it.
Go get your
I have a
cough.
cough drop.
Go get your
No,
cough shirt, and I'll sing a song.
no, it's okay. I got it. We're going to do it.
Okay.
I got it.
Got it?
Yep, I'm going to do it. By the prayers of Saint John, we will share his life. Okay, let me move this over here and this over here. And here we go. Life and Miracles of St. John Maximovitch of Shanghai and San Francisco, one of the greatest saints of the 20th century. Sanctity is not just a virtue, it is an attainment of such spiritual heights that the abundance of God's grace which fills the saint overflows on all who associate with him. Great is the saint's state of bliss in which they dwell, contemplating the glory of God. Being filled with love for God and man, they are responsive to man's needs, interceding before God and helping those who turn to them. Thus describing the ancient saints, Father, I'm just going to say Father. Father John simultaneously summarized his own spiritual attitude, which made him one of the greatest saints of our time. Childhood. Michael Maximovitch, the future Archbishop John, was born on June 4th, 1896, in the village of Adamovka in the province of Kharkov in southern Russia. He was a member of the Little Russian noble family of Maximovitch, to which St. John of Tobolsk had also belonged. He received at baptism the name of Michael, his heavenly protector being the Archangel Michael. He was a sickly child and ate little. He received his secondary education in the Poltava Military School, which he attended from 1907 to 1914. Upon completing military school, he entered Kharkov Imperial University in the Faculty of Law, from which he graduated in 1918 before it was seized by the Soviets. Kharkov, where Vladika spent his formative years, was a true town of Holy Russia, and the was a true town of Holy Russia, and the young Michael, impressionable to revelations of holiness, acquired there the pattern of his future life. There were two miraculous icons of the Mother of God, which were carried in a religious procession twice a year from the monasteries where they were treasured to the Dormition Cathedral. In the Protection Monastery, in a frescoed grotto underneath the altar, lay the remains of Holy Archbishop Mileti Lentovich, who after his death in 1841 rendered miraculous help to those who served a panakida for him at his coffin. Even during his lifetime, the archbishop was venerated for his severe asceticism, especially for the ascetic feat of abstaining from sleep. He was known to spend nights on end, standing motionless with lifted arms, deep in prayer. He foreknew the day and the hour of his own death. The young Maximovitch was known to have a veneration for this holy hierarch. Today, Archbishop John may be seen to resemble the holy man of Kharkov in at least three respects. He was known not to have slept in a bed for 40 years. He knew beforehand of his death, and before his glorification in 1994, his relics rested under a cathedral in a special grave chapel where panikidas were sung almost daily and the psalter read over his coffin by those asking for his help. This is a unique case of the transplanting, as it were, of a part of Holy Russia to contemporary America. While at Kharkov University, Misha Maximovitch spent more time reading the lives of the saints than attending classes. Nonetheless, he was an excellent student. Evidently, his emulation of saints was apparent even at that age, since Archbishop Anthony of Kharkov, one of the great church figures of that time, later Metropolitan Anthony, the first chief hierarch and founder of the Russian Church abroad, took special pains to become acquainted with him, and then kept the youth close to him and guided his spiritual formation. Belgrade. In 1921, during the Civil War in Russia, the future archbishop, together with his parents, his brothers, and his sister, was evacuated to Belgrade, where he and his brothers entered the University of Belgrade. One brother graduated in the technical faculty and became an engineer. The other graduated in law and served in the Yugoslav police. Michael himself graduated in 1925 in the Faculty of Theology. He was a student. While he was a student, he worked for his living by selling newspapers. In 1924, Michael was ordained reader in the Russian church in Belgrade by Metropolitan Anthony, who continued to exert great influence over him. And Michael, in his turn, showed the utmost respect and devotion to his superior. In 1926, Metropolitan Anthony tonsured him a monk and ordained him hierodeacon in the Milkov Monastery, giving him the name John after the future archbishop's own distant relative, St. John Maximovitch of Tobolsk. On November 21st of the same year, Father John was ordained hieromonk. The city of Bitol was in the diocese of Okrida. At that time, the ruling bishop of this diocese was Nicholas Velimirovich, a noted preacher, poet, writer, and inspirer of the popular religious movement. He, as much as Metropolitan Anthony, valued and loved the young hieromonk John, and himself exerted a beneficial influence upon him. More than once he was heard to say, "If you wish to see a living saint, go to Bitol to Father John." For indeed, it began to become evident that this was an entirely extraordinary man. His own students were first to discover what was perhaps Father John's greatest feat of asceticism. They noticed at first that he stayed up long after everyone else had gone to bed. He would go through the dormitories at night and pick up blankets that had fallen down and cover the unsuspecting sleepers, making the sign of the cross over them. Finally, it was discovered that he scarcely slept at all and never in a bed, allowing himself only an hour or two each night of uncomfortable rest in a sitting position or bent over on the floor praying before icons. Years afterward, he himself admitted that since taking the monastic vows, he had not slept lying in a bed. Such an ascetic practice is a very rare one, and yet it is not unknown to Orthodox tradition. Archbishop Averki of the Jordanville Holy Trinity Monastery, then a young hieromonk in Carpathia, Russia, witnessed the deep impression hieromonk John made upon the seminary students. When they returned home on vacations, they would speak of their extraordinary instructor who prayed constantly, served the divine liturgy, or at least received Holy Communion every day, fasted strictly, never slept lying down, and with true fatherly love inspired them with the high ideals of Christianity and of Holy Russia. In 1934, it was decided to raise hieromonk John to the rank of bishop, although nothing was farther from his mind. A lady who knew him relates how she met him at this time on a streetcar in Belgrade. He told her that he was in town by mistake, having been sent for in place of some other hieromonk John who was to be consecrated bishop. When she saw him the next day, he informed her that the situation was worse than he had thought. It was him they wished to make bishop. When he protested that this was out of the question, since he had a speech defect and could not enunciate clearly, he was only told that the prophet Moses had the same difficulty. The consecration occurred on May 28, 1934. Vladika was the last bishop of the very many to be consecrated by Metropolitan Anthony, and the extraordinarily high esteem in which that venerable hierarch held the new bishop is indicated in a letter which he sent to Archbishop Dmitry in the Far East. Himself declining an invitation to retire to China, he wrote, "Dear friend, I am very old and unable to travel, but in place of myself, as my soul, as my heart, I am sending you Bishop John. This little frail man, looking almost like a child, is in actuality a miracle of ascetic firmness and strictness in our time of total spiritual enfeeblement." Vladika was assigned to the Diocese of Shanghai, China. Vladika arrived in Shanghai in late November on the feast of the entrance of the Mother of God into the temple, and found a large cathedral uncompleted and a jurisdictional conflict to resolve. First thing he did was to restore church unity. He established contact with Serbs, Greeks, and Ukrainians. He paid special attention to religious education and made it a rule to be present at the oral examinations of the catechism classes in all the Orthodox schools in Shanghai. He at once became a protector of various charitable and philanthropic societies and actively participated in their work, especially after seeing the needy circumstances in which the majority of his flock, refugees from the Soviet Union, were placed. He never went visiting for tea to the rich, but he was to be seen wherever there was need, regardless of times and weather. He organized a home for orphans and the children of needy parents, entrusting it to the heavenly protection of a saint he highly venerated, Saint Tikhon of Zadonsk, who loved children. Vladika himself gathered sick and starving children off of the streets and dark alleys of Shanghai's slums. Beginning with 8 children, the orphanage later housed up to 100 children at one time, and some 1,500 in all. When the communists came, Vladika evacuated the whole orphanage, first to an island in the Philippines and then to America. It soon became apparent to his new flock that Vladika was a great ascetic. The core of his asceticism was prayer and fasting. He ate once a day at 11 p.m. During the first and last weeks of Lent, he did not eat at all, and for the rest of this and the Christmas fast, he ate only bread from the altar. His nights he usually spent in prayer and when he finally became exhausted, he would put his head on the floor and steal a few hours of sleep near dawn. When the time would come to serve matins, someone would knock on the door, to no avail. They would open the door and find Vladika huddled on the floor in the icon corner, overcome by sleep. At a tap on the shoulder, he would jump up, and in a few minutes he would be in church for services, cold water streaming down his beard, but quite awake. Vladika officiated in the cathedral every morning and evening, even when sick. He celebrated the divine liturgy daily, as he was to do for the rest of his life, and if for some reason he could not serve, he would still receive Holy Communion. No matter where he was, he would not miss a service. Once, according to a witness, Vladika's leg was terribly swollen, and the concilium of doctors, fearing gangrene, prescribed immediate hospitalization, which Vladika categorically refused. Then the Russian doctors informed the parish council that they released themselves of any responsibility for the health and even the life of the patient. The members of the parish council, after long pleas for mercy and threats of taking him by force, compelled Vladika to agree, and he was sent to the Russian hospital in the morning of the day before the feast of the exaltation of the Holy Cross. By 6 o'clock, however, Vladika came limping to the cathedral on foot and served. In a day, all the swelling was gone. Vladika's constant attention to self-mortification had its root in the fear of God, which he possessed in the tradition of the ancient church and of Holy Russia. The following incident, told by Skopichenko and confirmed by many from Shanghai, well illustrates his daring, unshakable faith in Christ. Mrs. Menshikova was bitten by a mad dog. The injections against rabies she either refused to take or took carelessly, and then she came down with this terrible disease. Bishop John found out about it and came to the dying woman. He gave her Holy Communion, but just then she began having one of the fits of this disease. She began to foam at the mouth, and at the same time she spit out the holy gifts which she had just received. The Holy Sacrament cannot be thrown out, so Vladika picked up and put in his mouth the holy gifts vomited by the sick woman. Those who were with him exclaimed, "Vladika, what are you doing? Rabies is terribly contagious." Vladika peacefully answered, "Nothing will happen. These are the holy gifts." And indeed nothing did happen. By now it had become known that Vladika was not only a righteous man and an ascetic, but was also so close to God that he was endowed with the gift of clairvoyance. And there were healings by his prayers. A striking account told by an eyewitness, Lydia Liu, testifies to Vladika's spiritual height. Vladika came to Hong Kong twice. It's strange, but I, not knowing Vladika then, wrote him a letter asking him to help a widow with children. And I also asked him about some personal spiritual matter, but I never received an answer. A year passed. Vladika came to Hong Kong, and I was in a crowd that went to meet him in church. Vladika turned to me and said, "It is you who wrote me the letter." I was astonished, since Vladika had never seen me before. A molbin was sung, after which Vladika, standing before a lectern, was delivering a sermon. I was standing next to my mother, and we both saw a light surrounding Vladika down to the lectern, a radiance around him a foot wide. This lasted a rather long time. When the sermon was over, I, struck by such an unusual phenomenon, told what we had seen to our friend, who replied to us, "Yes, many faithful saw it." My husband, who was standing a little way off, also saw the light. A similar event occurred in 1939, when a certain parishioner began to lose her faith due to many tribulations which had befallen her. Once, upon entering the church during Vladika's service, she witnessed during the transubstantiation of the Holy Sacraments a little flame in the form of a large tulip descending into the chalice. After this miracle, her faith returned, and she began repenting of her faint-heartedness. Vladika visited prisons and celebrated the Divine Liturgy for the convicts. On one occasion in Shanghai, Vladika John was asked to give communion to a dying man in a Russian hospital. This time he took another priest with him. On his arrival, he spotted a gregarious young man in his 20s playing a harmonica. This lad was to be discharged the next day. Vladika John called to him and said, "I want to give you communion right now." The young man immediately confessed his sins and received communion. The astonished priest asked Vladika why he did not go to the one dying, but tarried instead with an obviously healthy young man. Vladika answered, "He will die tonight, and the other, who is seriously ill, will live many years." And it happened just as he foretold. Vladika loved to visit the sick and did it every single day, hearing confessions and giving Holy Communion. In the condition of a patient, if the condition of a patient should become critical, Vladika would go to him at any hour of the day or night to pray at his bedside. Here is one undoubted miracle among the many worked by Vladika's prayers. It was recorded and placed in the archives of the county hospital in Shanghai. LD Sodosko, I can't do that one, was very much taken by the sport of horse racing. Once she was thrown off her horse. She hit her head on a rock and lost consciousness. She was brought to the hospital unconscious. A consilium of doctors agreed that her condition was hopeless and that it was not likely that she would live until morning. The pulse was almost gone. The skull was fractured in places so that small pieces of the skull were pressing on the brain. In such a condition, she would die on the operating table. Even if her heart would tolerate surgery and the result were successful, she would remain deaf, dumb, and blind. Her sister, after hearing all of this, rushed to Bishop John in despair and begged him to save her sister. Vladika agreed. He came to the hospital and asked for everyone to leave the room and prayed there for about 2 hours. Then he called the chief doctor and asked him to examine her again. How surprised the doctor was to discover that her pulse was normal. He agreed to perform the operation immediately, but only in the presence of Bishop John. The operation was successful, and the doctors were amazed when, after the operation, the patient regained consciousness and asked to drink. Soon she was released from the hospital and lived for many years a normal life. Vladika visited the prison also and celebrated the Divine Liturgy for the convicts on a primitive little table. But the most difficult task for a pastor is to visit the mentally ill and the possessed, and Vladika sharply distinguished between the two. Outside Shanghai, there was a mental hospital, and Vladika alone had the spiritual power to visit these terribly sick people. He gave them Holy Communion, and they surprisingly received it peacefully and listened to him. They always looked forward to his visits and met him with joy. Vladika possessed great courage. During the Japanese occupation, the Japanese authorities tried in every way possible to bend the Russian colony to their will. Pressure was directed through the heads of the Russian Immigrant Committee. 2 presidents of this committee strove to maintain its independence, and as a result, both were killed. Confusion and terror seized the Russian colony, and at that moment, Vladika John, in spite of the warnings from the Russians who were collaborating with the Japanese, declared himself the temporary head of the Russian colony. During the Japanese occupation, it was extremely dangerous to walk on the streets at night, and most people took care to be home by dark. Vladika, however, paying no heed to the danger, continued to visit the sick and needy at any hour of the night, and he was never touched. In Shanghai, a voice teacher, Anna Petrovna Lushnikova, taught Vladika the proper method of breathing and pronunciation of words, thus helping him to better his diction. At the end of each lesson, Vladika paid her $20. In 1945, during the war, she was gravely wounded and happened to be in a French hospital. On a very stormy night, feeling that she might die, Anna Petrovna began asking the nurses to call Vladika John, who was in France, so that he would give her communion. The nurses refused, since the hospital was locked up during the night due to wartime conditions. Anna Petrovna was beside herself and kept calling upon Vladika. Suddenly, around 11 o'clock in the evening, Vladika appeared in the ward. Unable to believe her eyes, Anna Petrovna asked Vladika whether this was a dream or did he really come to her. Vladika smiled, prayed, and administered communion to her. Following this, she calmed down and slept. The next morning, she felt cured. No one believed Anna Petrovna that Vladika visited her that night, since the hospital was tightly secured. However, her ward neighbor substantiated the fact that she also saw Vladika. The greatest surprise was that under Anna Petrovna's pillow was found a $20 bill. Thus, Vladika left a material evidence of his visit. A former Shanghai altar boy of Vladika's and presently archpriest George Laren relates, notwithstanding Vladika's strictness, all the altar boys loved him very much. To me, Vladika was an ideal whom I wished to emulate in every way. Thus, during Lent, I stopped sleeping in bed and lay on the floor. I stopped eating the usual meals with the family, but partook of bread and water in solitude. My parents became worried and took me to Vladika. Hearing them out, the prelate asked the guard to go to the store and bring a sausage. To my tearful outcries that I did not wish to break Lent, the wise prelate admonished me to eat the sausage and to remember always that obedience to parents is more important than personal accomplishments. How then shall I go on, Vladika? I asked, wishing nevertheless to especially apply myself. Go to church just as you always did, and at home do what your mother and father ask. I remember how grieved I was then that Vladika did not assign to me some special deeds. With the coming of the communists, the Russians in China were forced to once again to flee, most of them through the Philippine Islands. In 1949, approximately 5,000 refugees from the Chinese mainland were living in an international refugee organization camp on the island of Tubabao in the Philippines. This island is located in the path of the seasonal typhoons, which sweep through that part of the Pacific. During the 27-month period of the camp's occupancy, the island was threatened only once by a typhoon, and it changed course and bypassed the island. When the fear of typhoons was mentioned by one Russian to the Filipinos, they replied that there was no reason to worry because, quote, your holy man blesses your camp from 4 directions every night. They referred to Vladika John, for no typhoon struck the island while he was there. After the camp had been almost totally evacuated and the people resettled elsewhere, mainly in the USA and Australia, it was struck by a terrible typhoon that totally destroyed the camp. Paris. Vladika himself went to Washington, D.C. to get his people to America. Legislation was changed, and almost the whole camp came to the New World thanks to Vladika. The exodus of his flock from China accomplished, Archbishop John was given in 1951 a new field for his pastoral endeavor. He was sent by the Synod of Bishops to the Archdiocese of Western Europe, with his first see in Paris and later in Brussels. He was now one of the leading hierarchs of the Russian Church, and his attendance was frequently required at the sessions of the Synod in New York City. In Western Europe, Vladika took a deep interest not only in the Russians in the diaspora, for whom he exerted himself tirelessly in labors similar to those for which he had been known in Shanghai, but also in the local inhabitants. He received under his jurisdiction local Dutch and French Orthodox churches, protecting them and encouraging their Orthodox development. He celebrated the Divine Liturgy in Dutch and French, as before he had served in Greek and Chinese, and as later he was to serve in English. Vladika's interest in and devotion to the Church's saints, of whom his knowledge was already seemingly limitless, was extended now to Western European saints, dating from before the schism of the Latin Church. Many of them, venerated only locally, were not included in any Orthodox calendar of saints. He collected their lives and images of them, and later submitted a long list of them to the Synod. From this period of Vladika's presence in Western Europe, Mrs. E.G. Chertkova reminisces, on several occasions I visited Vladika when he lived in the Cadet Corps building near Paris. He had a small cell on the top floor. In the cell was a table, an armchair, and several chairs, and in the corner icons and a lectern with books. There was no bed in the cell, since Vladika did not lie down to sleep, but prayed by leaning on a tall stick with a crossbar on top. Sometimes he prayed on his knees. Most likely, when he prostrated himself, he would then fall asleep for a little while in that position on the floor. That is how he exhausted himself. Sometimes during our conversation, it seemed to me that he dozed, but when I stopped, he would immediately say, "Continue, I hear you." Since for a long time our church did not have a permanent priest, once a priest from another parish came to us to celebrate Vespers. The whole service lasted only 45 minutes. Usually it takes 2.5 hours. We were horrified. So many parts of Vespers were skipped that we decided to tell Vladika about this. We hoped that he will influence the priest to follow the established order of Orthodox services. But Vladika, smiling pleasantly, said to us, "How difficult it is to please you people. I celebrate too long and he too short." With such kindness and meekness, he taught us not to judge. Vladika's reputation for holiness, too, spread among the non-Orthodox as well as the Orthodox population. In one of the Catholic churches of Paris, a priest strove to inspire his young people with these words: "You demand proof. You say that now there are neither miracles nor saints. Why should I give you theoretical proof when today there walks in the streets of Paris a saint, Saint Jean des Pieds, Saint John the Barefoot?" Many people testified to the miracles worked by the prayers of Archbishop John in Western Europe. VD recounts, many were aware that it was not necessary to ask Vladika to visit someone. The Lord himself inspired him where and to whom to go. Vladika John was known to many in the French hospitals and was admitted therein at any time. Besides, Vladika unerringly directed his steps to where he was needed. My brother was once taken to the hospital after receiving a head wound. The X-ray revealed a large fracture of the skull. His eyes swelled and became sanguineous. He was in critical condition. Vladika, who did not know my brother, somehow found him in the hospital, prayed over him, and gave him communion. When my brother underwent a follow-up of head X-rays, there was no fracture to be found. My brother recuperated very fast, and the doctor was dumbfounded. In San Francisco, where the cathedral parish is the largest in the Russian church abroad, Vladika's lifelong friend, Archbishop Tikhon, retired due to ill health, and in his absence, the construction of a great new cathedral came to a halt as a bitter dispute paralyzed the Russian community. In response to the urgent request of thousands of Russians in San Francisco who had known him in Shanghai, Archbishop John was sent by the Synod in 1962 as the only hierarch likely to restore peace in the divided community. He arrived at his last assignment as bishop, 28 years to the day after his first arrival in Shanghai, on the feast of the entrance of the Mother of God into the temple, November 21st, 1962. Under Vladika's guidance, a measure of peace was restored. The paralysis of the community was ended, and the cathedral finished. Yet even in the role of peacemaker, Vladika was attacked, and accusations and slanders were heaped upon his head. He was forced to appear in public court in flagrant violation of church canons, to answer to preposterous charges of concealing financial dishonesty by the parish council. All involved were completely exonerated, but this filled Vladika's last years with the bitterness of slander and persecution, to which he unfailingly replied without complaint, without judging anyone, with undisturbed peacefulness. Vladika remained true to the end of his path of faithful service to the church. To those who knew him in his last years, perhaps two aspects of his character stood out. First was his strictness regarding the church and the law of God. At the end of October, the Roman Catholic Church celebrates the Feast of All Saints. There is a tradition that during the preceding night, the dark spirits celebrated their own festival of disorder. In America, this celebration, called Halloween, has become an occasion on which children make mischief dressed in costumes of witches, devils, ghosts, as if calling on the dark powers, a diabolic mockery of Christianity. A group of Russians organized on this night a Halloween ball. In the San Francisco Cathedral at this time was the all-night vigil celebrated, and a number of people were absent to the great sorrow of Vladika. After the service, Vladika went to the place where the ball was still in progress. He climbed the steps and entered the hall, to the absolute astonishment of the participants. The music stopped, and Vladika, in complete silence, glared at the dumbfounded people, slowly and deliberately making the round of the entire hall, staff in hand. He spoke not a word, and none was necessary. The mere sight of Vladika stung the conscience of all, as was evident from the general consternation. Vladika left in silence, and the next day in church he thundered his holy indignation in his flaming zeal, calling all to the devout Christian life. Yet Vladika is not best remembered by his flock for his sternness, but rather for his gentleness, his joyfulness, even for what is known as foolishness for Christ's sake. The most popular photograph of him captures something of this aspect of his character. It was especially noticeable in his conduct with children. After services, he would smile and joke with the boys who served with him, playfully knocking the mischievous ones on the head with his staff. Occasionally, the cathedral clergy would be disconcerted to see Vladika in the middle of a service, though never in the altar, bend over to play with a small child. And on feast days, when blessing with holy water was performed, he would sprinkle the faithful, not on top of the head as is usual, but right in the face, which once led a small girl to exclaim, "He squirts you!" with a noticeable glint in his eye and total unconcern at the discomfiture of some of the more dignified. Children were absolutely devoted to him, despite his usual strictness with them. Anna Hoderiva recounts, "My sister Ksenia Yarovoy, who lived in Los Angeles, suffered for a long time with a painful hand. She sought physicians, tried home remedies, yet nothing helped. She finally decided to turn to Vladika John and wrote to him in San Francisco. Some time went by, and the hand was healed. Ksenia began to forget about the previous pain in her hand. On one occasion, when she visited San Francisco, she went to the cathedral for services. At the end of the service, Vladika John held a cross to be kissed. On seeing my sister, he asked, 'How is your hand?' Vladika saw my sister for the first time. How then did he recognize her and know that it was she who had a painful hand? Anna S. recollects, my sister Musia and I got into an accident. A drunken young man was driving towards us. He struck the door with great force on the side where my sister was sitting. The ambulance was called, and she was taken to the hospital. Her condition was very serious. A lung was punctured and a rib broken, which caused her great pain. Her eyes were invisible in her swollen face. When Vladika visited her, she lifted her eyelid with her finger, and upon seeing him, took his hand and kissed it. She could not speak since she had a tracheotomy, but tears of joy flowed from her eyes. After that, Vladika visited her several times, and she began to get better. Once Vladika entered the ward and announced, Musia is feeling very poorly now. He then went to her, and closing the drape around her bed, he prayed for a long time. During his prayer, we were approached by two physicians, and I asked them how serious was my sister's condition, and if I should summon her daughter from Canada. We had not informed the daughter yet of her mother's accident. The physicians answered, to call or not to call the family is your problem. We cannot guarantee that she will survive until the morning. Thank God that she not only survived that night, but was completely cured and returned to Canada. My family and I believe that Musia was saved by the prayers of Vladika John. Vladika's life was governed by the standards of the spiritual life, and if this upset the routine order of things, it was in order to jolt people out of their spiritual inertia and remind them that there is a higher judgment than the world's. A remarkable incident from Vladika's years in San Francisco illustrates several aspects of his holiness. His spiritual boldness based on absolute faith, his ability to see the future and to overcome by his spiritual sight the bounds of space, and the power of his prayer, which beyond all doubt worked miracles. This incident is related by the woman who witnessed it, Mrs. L. Liu. The exact words of Vladika were confirmed by the Mr. T who is mentioned. In San Francisco, my husband was involved in an automobile accident and was seriously injured. His balance and he lost his balance and suffered terribly. At this time, Vladika had many troubles. Knowing the power of Vladika's prayers, I thought, if I ask Vladika to come to my husband, he will recover. But I was afraid to do this because Vladika was so busy then. 2 days passed, and suddenly Vladika came to us, accompanied by Mr. BT, who had driven him. Vladika stayed with us about 5 minutes, but I believed that my husband would recover. The state of his health was at its most serious point then, but after Vladika's visit there was a sharp crisis, and then he began to recover, living 4 more years after this. He was quite aged. Afterwards, I met Mr. T at a church meeting, and he told me that he had been driving Vladika to the airport. Suddenly, Vladika had said to him, "Let's go now to the Luz." He objected that they would be late for the plane, and that he could not turn around at that moment. Then Vladika had said, "Can you take the life of a man upon yourself?" He could do nothing but drive Vladika to us. Vladika, as it turned out, was not late for the plane. The death of a saint. Among those who knew and loved Vladika, the first response to the news of his sudden death was, "It cannot be." And this was more than a reaction to the suddenness of the event. For among those who were close to him, there had unaccountably developed the notion that this pillar of the church, this holy man who was always accessible to his flock, would never cease to be. There would never be a time when one would not be able to turn to him for advice and consolation. In one sense, in a spiritual sense, this has since turned out to be true. But it is also one of the realities of this world that every man who lives must die. Vladika was prepared for this reality. To the manager of the orphanage where he lived, who had spoken in the spring of 1966 of a diocesan meeting to be held 3 years later, he indicated, "I will not be here then." In May of 1966, a woman who had known Vladika for 12 years and whose testimony, according to Metropolitan Filaret, is worthy of complete confidence, was amazed to hear him say, "I will die soon, at the end of June, not in San Francisco, but in Seattle." Again, on the evening before his departure for Seattle, 4 days before his death, Vladika astonished a man for whom he had just served a moleben with the words, "You will not kiss my hand again." And on the day of his death, at the conclusion of the divine liturgy which he celebrated, he spent 3 hours in the altar praying, emerging not long before his death, which occurred on July 2nd, 1966. He died in his room in the parish building next to the church. He was heard to fall, and having been placed in a chair by those who ran to help him, breathed his last peacefully and with little evident pain in the presence of the miracle-working Kursk icon of the sign. Before the canonization of Archbishop John, his relics reposed in a chapel in the basement of the San Francisco Cathedral. After the canonization in July of 1994, the relics of Archbishop John were removed to the main floor of the cathedral. Soon after his repose, a new chapter began in the story of this holy man. Just as Saint Seraphim of Sarov told his spiritual children to regard him as living after his death and to come to his grave and tell him what was in their hearts, so our Vladika also has proved to be hearing those who revere his memory. Soon after his death, a one-time student of his, Father Ambrosi, saw one night a dream or a vision. Vladika, clad in Easter vestments, full of light and shining, was sensing the cathedral. He joyfully uttered to him just one word while blessing him: happy. Later, before the end of the 40-day period, Father Constantine, long Vladika's deacon and now a priest, who had lately been angry at Vladika and had begun to doubt his righteousness, saw Vladika in a dream, all in light, with rays of light shining around his head so brightly that it was impossible to look at them. Thus were Father Constantine's doubts of Vladika's holiness dispelled. The manager of the St. Tikhon of Zadonsk home, and long a devoted servant of Vladika, M.A. Shakhmatova, saw a remarkable dream. A crowd of people carried Vladika in a coffin into St. Tikhon's church. Vladika came to life and stood in the royal doors, anointing the people and saying to her, "Tell people, although I have died, I am alive." As during his lifetime, Vladika continues to be very active in helping those who need him. Here are just two of the thousands of cases of Vladika's miracles. Victor Boyton, who witnessed the healing of his friend by Vladika John, recounts, "The miracle occurred after I had received the copyright to the English publication of Orthodox Life from Jordanville, New York, which included photos of Vladika John. I had a friend, a Muslim from Russia, who was suffering from leukemia and was losing his sight. The doctors concurred that in 3 months' time he would be blind. Placing the picture of Vladika John by my vigil light, I began to pray daily for my friend. After a short period of time, my friend was healed from the leukemia and began to see normally. The eye doctors were amazed at this occurrence. From then on, my friend has led a normal life and reads without impediment." The Archbishop Stefan Pavlenko recollects, "My brother Paul, although not in the military, lived for some years in Vietnam. There he sought children who were wounded or orphaned due to the then continuing war. He placed them either in orphanages or hospitals. Thus he became close with his future wife, a certain Vietnamese Kim En, who was also involved with helping the unfortunate children. My brother introduced Kim to the Christian faith and to the lives of many of God's saints. She told my brother that during her very difficult times, there appeared to her in her dreams a certain monk who consoled her and told her what to do. Once, towards Easter time, I sent my brother some cassettes of monastic songs, as well as some books and journals of a spiritual context. Having received my parcel and having shown the spiritual literature to Kim, he was surprised when, upon seeing the cover of a certain journal, she exclaimed, 'This is the monk who appears to me in my sleep.' She pointed to a well-known picture of Vladika John taken among the graves of the New DeVivo Monastery in Spring Valley, New York. Kim was baptized in the Orthodox Church with the name Kira. Blessed Archbishop John of Shanghai and San Francisco was canonized as a saint by the Russian Church on July 2nd, 1994. It was a wonderful and unforgettable event to which hundreds of clergy and many thousands of laymen came from all over the world. The importance of St. John for the people of the 20th century cannot be underestimated. Those who knew him personally or have read about his life and miracles have learned of the tremendous spiritual power embodied in this frail little man. God was drawn to the burning, loving heart of Vladika John, which became a vessel of his grace. He entrusted the saint with heavenly secrets and the ability to transcend physical laws, making him a point of contact between himself, the Creator, and us, his creatures. There can be no doubt that Vladika John has been sent by God as a gift of holiness to the people of the last days. At a time when imitation has become the norm in all aspects of life, when the authentic spirit of the Christian faith has been so hidden that most are oblivious of its very existence, he can be seen as a model of genuineness. Vladika John has set the right tone of true apostleship in the modern world. As more people are drawn into the Orthodox Church of Christ before the final unleashing of evil, may they look to him as their loving guide and a pastor who knows no death. He is a kind of measuring stick that indicates who and what is real in our confusing times. The unit of measure is nothing more than pure Christian love, which he possessed. The unit of measure is nothing other than pure Christian love, which he possessed and distributed in abundance. With this love, the intense struggle of spiritual life becomes worth the effort. By the prayers of St. John, may God bless us and save us. Amen.
Have you got a photo again?
Yeah.
Or an icon even?
Yeah.
You almost put me to sleep.
Well,
Not because it wasn't
you work hard.
interesting,
No,
but
I get it.
just because I was like having a story read to me.
I'm pulling up an icon here. I'll open it in a new tab. Let's see. Let's share this one. Hold on one second.
Oh,
I know. I was just about to. Here we go. Here it is. That's better.
Oh yeah, nice.
St. John Maximovitch. So there was some people would give him a hard time for being obese, that he was like fat. They said he was fat. But someone once saw him, and it looked like he had a belly, but what he had dozens of relics in little bags that he kept hung around his waist, and so it made him look like he was obese, but he actually just had a ton of relics.
Well, they called him a frail man, man, quite a bit.
Yeah. There were just some people who didn't know him well who
Mm-mm.
thought he was fat, but he wasn't fat. He just had a ton of relics around his waist.
So
But
he was very serious about his asceticism. Hey.
yeah, and apparently he was also very serious behind the altar, like with the young men. He was very strict about not talking and holding still for the altar servers.
Have you got an actual photo? Can we look at one of those
Yeah,
too?
sure. Yeah.
Oh, excuse me. I gotta. There, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I've got a. Oh yeah, here's one that kind of. Well, let's see. There's a few. I'll just share the screen and then we can look at them.
Mm-hmm. That must have been interesting for him to be in San Francisco in the 60s.
Yeah, right.
Can you imagine?
Yeah. Well,
Being born in 1896 and then ending up in San Francisco in the 1960s.
yeah. That's as I could be wrong. I think that's where Father Seraphim Rose met him. Was it San Francisco? And there was a
really?
bookstore there too. Yeah, there was an Orthodox bookstore that they opened up under the
Oh,
direction.
so is this his obesity here?
Yeah, but it was actually
Yeah.
relics.
Wonderful.
This is him younger.
Mm-hmm.
This was nice with the icon in a picture.
Yeah. Wow. Well, that was great, Jeremy. Thank you so much.
Yeah, well, by the prayers of St. John, I was able to get through it without coughing.
You did. You actually did.
So, glory to God.
It was a miracle. Yeah, and God says,
Wow. Yeah, he was. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, St. John still intercedes very powerfully, and for a lot of people have experienced his intercessions, and we have a beautiful icon of him in our parish, a large hand painted one. It has a bunch of leather work around it. It's just beautiful. And yeah, like I said, I've been on a pilgrimage to the cathedral where he lies in state. And
Mm-hmm.
it's a very, very special experience. Very beautiful place. Oh, here you can see.
Oh, okay. Wow. Mm.
Oh, so there's lots of stories that I've heard that we didn't share tonight, but
Yeah. I was surprised there were some because I remember you mentioning him before, and yeah, some of the things that you mentioned I didn't hear in this one.
yes. Well, that just means we'll have to share his life again and share a different version next time.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, it's fun if he's got lots of stories. That was wonderful to hear of the Catholic priest in Paris who said if you want to see a real saint,
yeah,
in real
yeah.
life.
There's one walking around.
Yeah. That made me a little emotional actually.
Yeah, yeah. Well, he used to. He would go out in the streets at night in Shanghai, and to find the kids who were out there for the wrong reasons, who were homeless and orphans,
Mm-hmm.
bring them into his orphanage in Shanghai. And then he had one in San Francisco too. He had an orphanage there as well.
Yeah. I
But,
didn't realize that there were Russian refugees in China.
yeah, it was after the communist takeover of Russia. They fled to China.
It seems like wherever they went, oh, sorry, wherever they went, communism followed them.
Yeah.
Bad
Well,
joke,
yeah, they
bad.
didn't stay in the Philippines long enough, but then they came here and brought it with them. Oof.
Jan God says, what an interesting hexagon pattern on that robe.
Oh, I missed it. I'll go back. I'll find it. I'll see if the one I can see the one he's talking about.
Blue. It's a
Did I
blue.
pass it? Did I miss it? I don't know. I don't see it.
Up.
Up. Holding the two candles. Oh, okay. Yes. Where was that?
There's
Uh,
a
uh,
photo.
I'm sorry. Okay, we'll start again.
You gotta go slower, Jeremy. Unless, of course, your brain can follow.
I know. I'm sorry. I'm going quick. There it is. I'll open it in a new tab so I can make it bigger. It's not a very big picture though, but I will share it. It looks like leaves to me, but yeah, that is a pattern I haven't seen before. I'll share it.
Jan God's wondering if it means something. The vestments always mean something, Jan God. They wear different vestments for um, different liturgy, like different calendar days and different
Yeah,
times of the day and
different times of the year.
different
Kind of
times of the
rotate.
year.
Yeah,
Sometimes they change the vestments a couple times within the liturgy itself.
and the bishop always wears the fanciest robe out of everybody, so you can see who's who.
If literal, like, I'm not trying to culturally appropriate anything, but if you look at the way that the high priest of the temple was dressed in the time of Jesus's day, you'll see a lot of similarities to the vestments in the Orthodox Church.
Yeah, and with a little bit of Roman influence as well, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
definitely.
So that pattern, I I don't know, Yon God, if that particular, because those look like leaves to me, and they have all different kinds of patterns you'll see on these robes. One of my favorites. Let's see. I'll pull up St. John Chrysostom. I actually remade this pattern in Excel, and I had it on my desktop as for my computer for a while.
The pattern, just the
yeah,
pattern.
the pattern. It's like a repeating pattern, but it's in a non.
Yeah, like God said it reminded him of bees.
Yeah,
bees have a little bit of a, they're part of the liturgy, right? At least their wax is.
Yeah. Beeswax candles are what are traditionally used in churches, and they're also, the nice thing about them is that they put off way less smoke. This pattern, I love that pattern, the repeating cross pattern, the red and white that he has on his robe there. Where, because it's like, it's not just, it's an offset pattern.
Yeah.
And when you see a whole page of it, it's almost like it looks alive, like your eyes can't really hold still on it.
Oh, okay.
It's very busy.
Yeah.
It's very busy. It's very stimulating to your eye. It's very fun. I had it on my desktop for a while. Co-workers would walk by and like, how can you stand to have that as your desktop? I was like, oh, there's a little story behind it.
Well, I'm gonna throw a link in chat before I forget.
Yeah, there's quite a few really cool repeating patterns in the particularly in icons of St. John Chrysostom. I don't know why, but they're really great. This is another one of my favorites. I love this pattern. And there's definitely, Yon God, there's definitely some symbolism in there. With the 4 and the 3, and the crosses and the square and all that. That's all significant. There was another one I saw that had this one's similar. Is that same delay or that same repeating pattern? But yeah, St. John Chrysostom. Oh, this is another good one. He gets all the cool patterns. I don't know why, but I've noticed that a lot of his icons have really great and interesting patterns. This one's another really fun repeating one. You can see all the crosses that are in there.
Yeah,
it's good stuff. Yeah. No. Oh man, you should see these robes close up in person. They're all embroidered and it's all hand done. It's done in mostly in like traditional Orthodox countries. Most of the priests buy them from women in traditional Orthodox countries that make them all. But it's very beautiful. Yeah. So anyway. Okay. No takers. Nobody wants to hang out with us. I'm not contagious like over the internet. You won't get sick.
That was almost like an hour of reading, and you managed to get through that.
Glory to God. By the prayers of St. John, I was able to get through. So that's just how it works.
Yeah. That's gonna God says he doesn't have much to contribute. Well, you've asked some nice questions.
Yes, you've had some good questions.
Yeah. No. Why I'm drawing a blank.
You know what? Young God just came to mind. The hexagon doesn't have meaning, but the octagon definitely does. You see the octagon in baptismal fonts a lot.
What's do you know what it is?
Yeah, so the number 8, it's the 8th day of creation, basically. Right. It's the day. So Sunday is the first day and the 8th day. The Sunday where Christ was resurrected, so Pascha. was the first day of the week, but it was also the eighth day, because it was outside time and was the beginning of the new era, basically. So then there's a lot of other deeper symbolism tied to it than that I don't understand as well and probably can't describe as well. But I do know that like Sundays, especially Pascha Sunday, is considered the eighth day of creation, where creation was finalized and where God's work was, redeemed.
In Judaism, the eighth day is the Sabbath, and it's also the world to come.
Yes.
Yeah.
In Christianity as well.
I know.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, it's pretty seamless. Pretty much seamless. And that kind of symbolism, anyway. I was going to say something now. What was it? Cracks. What do you mean by that, Joy? Cracks of the eighth day?
I don't know. Hello, Joy.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's see if I can find an icon. Let's see if I can find a picture of it. You see it in, like I said, you see it in icons. Sometimes baptismal fonts are shaped that way, and actually the church itself is shaped that way. Like some of the Russian churches are that shape.
In an octagon?
Yeah, monasteries there's a monastery that's in an octagon. When you're here's a good picture actually. Let me share this. Let me go back here and oh man, okay, that needs to. Why is it doing that? I don't know. Sorry, my computer is being weird sometimes. So this is a good picture. So this is looking up at the ceiling, obviously, with the dome, and then they had the squinches, and and there's an octagon shape going on there.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's definitely, there's a lot of connections between octagons in the church. There was another. Yeah, there are octagon shaped churches as well. That's an Ethiopian one. This is a monastery octagon. So
So can you maybe explain for those people who don't know the Orthodox cross? Oh, you just got rid of it.
Sure. Oh yeah, sorry. I'll pull it back up.
Yeah.
That's a nice one. I will share it again. Okay. So we have lots of different crosses in the church, but this is the one you'll see a lot people wearing. And there's different versions of it. This is one, the crucifix actually, but it's the most basic aspect is that this is the sign over his head saying he's the King of the Jews. This is the arm, this is where his arms were, and this is where his feet were. The symbolism is that the three realms were all unified on that day. So heaven and earth and all the people on the earth, and also even hell. So this board being askew is representing that heaven, earth, and hell were all aligned on the crucifixion day. They were all healed. They were all brought brought under the, what would you say, the authority of Christ. I mean, there was before too. Obviously, he's outside of time and place, but I mean, it all came together on that day.
Right.
And then the footboard also is pointing. Typically, it's pointing up to the right, because he was between the two thieves, and the one on his left rejected him, and then the one on his right confessed him. And Christ said to him, "On this day you'll be with me in paradise."
Mm-hmm.
So this bottom board is also to honor the thief on the cross who confessed Christ. But you'll also see this cross a lot. This is the flowering cross. There's a lot of different. It's a different version of it. But yeah, typically the one with the 3 bars is. You usually only see that in Orthodox churches. I haven't seen it in other churches.
No, I haven't either.
You'll see this one too, where they combine the flower cross with the one with the footboard.
Yeah.
This is also reminiscent of the staff of Aaron that budded flowers.
Right.
Representing that he was the high priest. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's all kinds of symbolism. We could spend all night on that. No, if Jonathan Peugeot could, I probably couldn't.
Yeah.
We're about and got to the bottom of the reserves of what I have to offer.
No, that's good. Thank you, because I had to have that explained to me too at one point. So I just thought, if other people are wondering, they could, learn something about that. And what I like about it is that everything has a meaning, right? Like, it's not just random. It's not a, it's very.
Right. It's deliberate.
Yeah.
That's what I like about Orthodoxy, is that everything you see, like when you go into the church in Divine Liturgy, like in the nave, everything you see there has been deliberately placed, mm-hmm. and is deliberately participating in liturgy. Something I was thinking about today, liturgy itself, the word is from Greek, and it means public works. So divine liturgy is the divine public work. So like I don't know if you guys have this in Canada, but in the United States, we have the Public Works Department.
Oh yeah.
The Public Works Department does the bridges and the roads and the lights and the sewers and the water, right?
Yeah.
That's this ties in. It's really great. So in ancient Greece, instead of the city being in charge of that, what the city would do would say, "Hey, we need a bridge," and the wealthy members of the community would get in a contest to bid on who got to build the bridge. But it wasn't the lowest bidder. They took the highest bidder to do it, because they were putting up their own money, and they were the ones who were basically the honorary leader or the honorary manager of that project. Mm-hmm. So they would put up their own money, and then all of the people would also contribute to the fund to build the bridge, say, and so they were all participating, and they would also help build the bridge. Everybody in the community would work on it in some way. They would contribute, and then once it was finished, it was christened with the name of the person who donated it, right? The patron,
right?
So it was a way of offering up something for the community, right?
Yeah, and lots of incentive to make something really, like Young God says, this is going to last and has beauty and all that.
Yes, correct.
Yeah.
It was supposed to be beautiful, and that's why the wealthy people were competing with each other to see how much money they could spend on it, right? And it was also a sign of their, their wealth, but it was a way of honoring their community and offering something to the community. Mm-hmm. And so we go to divine liturgy. It's a public work, right? Where we're all, and it's divine because, God is there as well. God joins us there. Mm-hmm. And we offer something up to him. He blesses it. It becomes him. And then we eat and drink of his flesh and blood, Mm-hmm. I think that's one thing that has taken me a while, coming from, not a Protestant background, but the Mormon background, which is practically Protestant. But this idea that because when I left the Mormon church, I was like, well, why do I need to go to the church and sit in this room and listen to a bunch of people talk about God when I could just sit in this forest and pray? Really, that was a big thing, right? And it was a legitimate criticism of.
I think it's a legitimate criticism, personally.
Yeah, I do too. But now, with the Orthodox view of divine liturgy isn't just a meeting where they teach you about the scriptures. It's not. I mean, you do learn the theology if you could pay attention to the hymns and the prayers, but you're being prepared for communion, right? You're preparing and entering into a state where you won't, hopefully be burned down by taking it lightly, and you're actually communing with God. You are sharing a meal with God, and God is also the meal, and this is a completely different view of that service and of what the church is than what I grew up with, Mm-hmm. And it's been it took me a while to get out of my old mindset, but the more I move into Orthodoxy and move into that viewpoint, the more grace-filled those services are.
Oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely. I haven't had the privilege of being in them very often, but I do have quite a cathedral out here.
Yeah. Yeah. You just need an altar and a priest.
Yeah. My daughter, when she came recently last weekend and stayed with me for a few days, and she said, "Mom, could we go see Saint Seraphim?" Because she hadn't seen it yet.
Oh yeah.
And so I said, "Okay, well, we have to go with the snowmobile because it's quite the pilgrimage back there." And so we piled the baby in the middle on her lap, and then, and it's kind of like it winds through the woods, but then it crosses a bridge, and then you have to go up a steep hill and down a steep hill.
Woo! It's quite a ride.
Yeah. Well, I put it somewhere where I could pilgrimage to it, and I can go many different ways.
Yeah.
Not with the snowmobile, actually. I'm just kind of stuck with one way in the winter, but in the summertime, I try to take a different way every time.
Sure.
And but yeah, and it's tricky because there's when I go up the steep hill, it goes like this, and then it's kind of up high. It's at the top of a hill, but we're on the crest of the hill. And so I've got my daughter and a 1-year-old on a snowmobile, and I'm trying not to tip it.
Right.
And so
if you go slow, it's worse, right?
My body has to stand on this side.
Yes.
My whole body, and I'm standing.
Yeah.
And anyway, and then we have to park and then march through the snow to where he is. And then we did some prayers. And anyway, she said to me,
beautiful.
She said, "Mom, that was the highlight of my whole visit." It was the trip to St. I said, "Really? Wow."
Yeah.
Because my kids never knew me as an Orthodox Christian.
Yeah.
They just knew me as some kind of renegade Christian. Yeah, it's a nice mini pilgrimage. I like to do it that way, actually, because and I found out later that Saint Seraphim actually because he couldn't pilgrimage to the Holy Land or anything like that. He was kind of stuck in his forest. He actually did that too. He had several different icons in different places, and he would pilgrimage to them.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I just feel like taking a shortcut to Saint Seraphim is just really not kosher.
Right.
I got to do the
Yeah.
pilgrimage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've seen that. I've seen a couple of monasteries where they'll have a forest, and there's usually like a trail through the forest, and they have icons along the way. And then I've seen that several places. Then I've also seen a couple of monasteries where they have icons out on the fence, like on the boundary of their property. You know, they'll have icons out there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the monks will go out there and
Yeah. On the
pray
edges.
on
Yeah.
the edge. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a little story around that, but it's a longer one. So I won't, how that all came to be. For me, I mean.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah.
About Saint Seraphim being out there?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. It was a process because I'm just a really, what's the word? I'm slow to take things up because I don't trust myself.
Yeah.
And
That's wise.
and I'm kind of, like that's all. I thought it was a bad trait until I found out that, like when you said the other day that if the icon is myrrh bearing, they usually do like 3 exorcisms before before it passes the. No, it's not procrastinator, young God. There's
It's more like sobriety. It's like doubting. It's like,
I mean,
your idea is probably dumb.
there's a tinge of procrastination, but it's not really just, I don't feel like it. It's not that kind of procrastination. It's I don't know, like it, to me, these things are a big deal, and I don't want to just rush out in some, ecstasy and I'm gonna put a,
Yes, right. Yeah.
kind of thing. So
Yeah.
it takes time for me, and I think I just naturally need a lot of ritual around it too. Like it has to, I had to build, I started to build the thing. My husband actually built it in the end because I'm not handy like he is. He makes things beautiful. And then it just kind of sat there for the longest time. And I was like, it was kind of like when St. Xenia said to me that I should talk to Shelley. I was like, yeah, no. Go away.
I think that I think that's wise. It's good to doubt this stuff. It's good to sit on it. Yeah.
Yeah, like fermenting barley. Yeah.
Yeah,
Go.
that's a good analogy.
That's a
It
good
is
analogy.
good. Because generally it's just yeah, we're very prone to being deluded.
Yeah. I mean, I was fairly impetuous when I was young, and
Same.
I mean, I'm sure it didn't work out for me sometimes. Other times, I don't know. I can't really put my finger on it about my impetuousness. Somehow it feels like I was led that way. Like there were just certain things that I had to do even.
Yep.
And they might've, like once I've decided, it's done. Like there's no looking back. But maybe that's why, maybe because it takes me so long to, make that move.
Yeah.
But I am a lot slower now in my old age than I was. And it's not because I'm tired. I'm just letting things, my husband taught me that trick. Sleep on it, he'd say.
Yeah.
Just sleep on it.
Yeah.
Like, why? I know it's going to work. Yeah.
I had to do that with purchases too. I used to be a very impulsive buyer, and I've learned that now. I put it on a wish list, or I put it in a basket or something. And I sit on it. I make myself sit on it for at least 2 weeks, and then I go, okay, I guess I probably need that. But most of the time I go, nah, I don't really.
You wouldn't have believed it when I had my brain injury. It was just brutal. Like my my kids would talk me down off the ledge of retail suicide
Oh, yeah.
while we were in the store.
Right. Yeah.
Because I'd have like 6 things in my hands going, "They're so beautiful."
Yeah.
And one time my daughter, who was, gosh, how old was she at the time? She was still taking the school bus, so it was, I think, her last year of high school. And, she's like, the salesperson's just, like, chomping at the bit, right?
Right.
And my daughter says to me, "Mom, maybe why don't you put all that stuff down? We'll go for lunch." And I'm like, "Lunch?"
Yeah.
Like, I was just so different. And then she goes, "Yeah, and we can think about it, and if you want, we can come back and you can get the." And the sales guy goes, "Okay, this is a first.
Huh.
I've never seen a child have that conversation with their
Yeah.
mother. I've
Right.
seen a mother have that conversation with their child."
Yep. That's fun.
But that's what I was like. I was just like I had no threshold, so everything was like
Yeah.
just spontaneously happening.
Yeah, that's what happened to me after my car accident when I was like 14, 15. Like
Yeah,
everything that came to my head came out of my mouth.
yeah, yeah,
Just no
and loud.
hesitation. Right. Yes.
Everyone would go.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I told a
That
lot of
happened too.
very inappropriate jokes over and over again in the hospital.
Mhm. Yeah, so yeah, that was, and then yeah, anyway, and then, of course, we wouldn't go back, and I wouldn't buy the thing because thank God my daughter had a head on her shoulders, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, I
And I
understand
couldn't really go anywhere by
why.
myself because I couldn't find my way around like, I was,
Oh, yeah.
couldn't find my way around, or I'd get overwhelmed, or yeah.
Right. Have you ever read My Stroke of Insight? Have you ever read that book or heard of it?
I've heard of it, I think.
Um
My Stroke of Insight. Who wrote that?
Jill Bolte Taylor.
Oh,
Off-
that's that lady who does the TED Talk when she had this.
yeah. Yep. Yep.
She was a scientist or something.
Yep. She was a Harvard scientist studying the brain and had an aneurysm on the left side of her brain. So she lost the functionality of her left side of her brain. So this tied in really nicely with Mill Gilchrist around here.
Mhm.
Because she was explaining what it was like to lose the functionality of her left brain and then have to rehabilitate that, and what the world was like through the right brain, like
Remember
relying
the TED Talk?
primarily on right brain functionality. It was just fascinating. It's a really great book. Let me share my screen.
Mhm.
There is for you youngins, TED Talks used to be cool. TED Talks was not just a TED Talks was not just a derisive figure of speech
PSYOP.
that you use
Just
for
say it.
your. Yeah, well,
Yeah.
no, I was saying because my kids use TED Talks whenever I start talking. They're like, "Oh, here comes another TED Talk."
Oh, I
They
see.
were like a 20-minute lecture. But anyway, it was kind of popular like 15 years ago. I don't know what happened to them really, but she
Well,
gave a TED
PSYOP,
Talk.
right, Young God? Young God would agree with me. It's
Yeah,
PSYOP.
it's definitely a psyop. Oh, I completely agree with you. But this one in particular was Jill Bolte Taylor, and it's a fascinating. There is a TED Talk of it. It's like 20 minutes long of
That's
her kind
really
of
good.
giving the condensed version of this book. But this book is really an interesting read.
Mhm.
It did it did it actually helped me move back toward God because I
Really?
could see. Yes, she explained her experience of she explained her experience of feeling like this connection to the cosmos, like she was like a whale swimming through the ocean of time, I think is the way she explained it. And then she would like come back to her senses and be like, "Oh wait, this is bad. I'm having a stroke." Right? Like this isn't good.
Yeah.
Because she was like aware of the symptoms, but
Yeah.
she would like drift
In
out
and
of
out.
her awareness, yeah, in and out of this right brain.
Yeah, I remember that.
She
Yeah.
kind of was talking about that. And,
And
and it,
she knew what was happening, so she was actually tracking, like, the way it was happening to her, like, she could
yeah,
track along with it in a way.
yeah.
even though she was floating off and coming back, you know?
Yeah, and she was trying to get a hold of someone, but she couldn't. She was trying to call somebody, but anyway,
Right.
no, the whole story is really great, and but I mean, it had two effects. It helped me connect with God, but at the same time, it was like it connected me to New Age more than God, I would say. But it opened me back up to the numinous, right? It opened me
Yeah.
back up to
That's what I was
something
gonna say.
larger than myself. I mean, I definitely went down the more meditative path at that point. Was
Well,
getting back into, but it got me back into Taoism.
you know, there was a Ralston College video that came out fairly recently. Like McGilchrist did the Sophia lectures at Ralston, right? And this video was a Q&A session that he held with the students, and the students asked some amazing questions. And one of the students made reference to the, you know, I don't know if he said women or the feminine are more right-brained and the masculine is more left-brained. And McGilchrist just said, no, actually not. I was like, oh, I was all ears.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
but he was talking about the physiology of the brain
Mm.
in the man compared to that of a woman, and the man has the bigger right hemispheric you know, side, right?
Yeah.
Like than the woman has. And it's not just because her whole brain is smaller. Like there's an actual large difference between.
Proportionally, yeah. Right.
Yeah. I can't remember all the details, of course, but
I know the corpus callosum is larger in women, so the band of nerves that connect the two halves of the brain, the two hemispheres, is larger in women, and that women typically have more. They have more connections that are longer between different disparate parts of their brain than men do. Men have more localized connections, and women have more. A greater proportion of the connections in their brain are between disparate parts of their brain. I know I'm not explaining that very well. I'm sorry, but like, you know, so men would have a lot of localized connections and fewer connections that are, you know, separate parts of their brain, and women have fewer connections locally and more connections that, you know, that are the longer more separated parts of their brain. So, but I do, yeah, as far as I know, that the women's brain is also more, the two hemispheres are more interconnected. So
yeah, but then he got into actual like concrete examples. Anyway, if anybody's interested, it's a great video. I think it's almost 2 hours, and it's very chill and some really good questions from the students. And, you know, he gets to talk freely, you know, about things. And yeah. And there was actually, I think that's the one I told you about, Jeremy. There was a Mormon student there.
Oh yeah.
Asked him a question about something now. But yeah, I mean, there is a I don't know how to say it. You know, a lot of people think McGilchrist is against the left hemisphere, and he's so not.
Right.
I don't get why people think that. Like they're
in their left brain and they want to
just taking
categorize
it so personally. But he's totally not.
Right.
You know? And
Right.
and I don't know, those Sophia lectures and also that Q&A, he says some things I've never heard him say before. He actually said he was a Christian.
Wow.
And I've heard him say he couldn't bring himself to be a Christian. He would like to, but he just couldn't bring himself to. And in this Sophia lecture at the end of the Q&A, he said it's finally happened to him.
Glory to God.
Yeah.
Yeah, the last time I heard him describe himself, he called himself a panentheist.
Yeah, he still does. He still says he's a panentheist. which is
Yeah.
what Orthodox theology is actually too.
Yes, correct. That's correct.
It's what they call soft panentheism. But yeah, so I don't know when this happened to him, but it happened to him because I just
Yeah.
watched a recent thing with John Cleese where someone asked him if he believed, if he was a Christian, if he believed in God, and he said, I'd really like to, but I just can't bring myself to do it.
Yeah.
And that wasn't that long before the Sophia lectures.
Mm.
So something great happened to him in between.
Oh, I thought you meant John Cleese said that, but you're
No,
saying Ian
McGilchrist
McGilchrist
was
said
with
that.
John Cleese.
Oh, I see.
There's a recent John Cleese and Ian McGilchrist conversation on comedy and laughter. I think, on laughter.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, they're good friends.
Oh,
The two of them.
that's fun to. Oh wow, that's fun to know. What a great. That would be so fun to have dinner with them. That's a dinner party I would go to. I would fly around the world to go to the dinner with Ian McGilchrist and John Cleese. Wow.
Well, who said it? I think it was Martin Shaw, because he did the Skinboat and the Star. So he does these. He used to do these wilderness initiation things before he became a Christian. Now he's changing it up, and he has a location. You have to go for, I think it's 5 weeks, but it's only on the weekends. Because I said to him, well, can I go for one weekend? He's like, no, you have to come for all of them. I'm like, oh yeah, sure. I'll just hop over to the pond once a week. No. In other words, you got to get a, Airbnb for like 2 months in the UK, right? Just to go to it. Everybody's going, you got to do one, in North America, right?
Yeah.
For these people, for us. But anyway, he had Ian McGilchrist for one of those weekends as a speaker there.
Yeah.
They've become fairly good friends, I think. And he mentioned on his Substack that Ian's got a great sense of humor, and they had a wonderful, it was a really great, fun time together.
Oh man, that's so beautiful. That's great. Yeah, no, I love all three of those people. Ian McGilchrist, John Cleese, and Martin Shaw.
Shaw. Yeah.
Yeah. I just reread his book. It's a pretty quick read. It was Courting the Wild. Is that what it is? Courting the Wild Twin.
Yeah, that is such an amazing book. It's so enthralling, actually. The opening.
Yeah.
I asked him about, when I talked to him in that Girl Country thing, that interview that I did a long time ago. That was the book that I haven't read any of his other books, but I read that one, and I was just like, I said to him, I said, Martin, that book just was like singing my song.
Yeah.
He said he wrote it. I think he said he wrote it in like 2 weeks.
Wow.
Or no, 5 days is what he said.
Oh,
5 days he wrote it. He said it was just, he described it as thoroughly masticated wisdom. And it just poured out of him.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a beautiful read. It's very good.
It's really good. He tells some stories. Actually, I would recommend the audiobook because he reads it. And
he does.
He's a storyteller. So
I have to get it. I didn't know
you
that.
need to listen to Martin's books.
Yes. Oh, this is good. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
He has some great videos on YouTube too, where he tells stories.
Jawbone.
Yeah.
He just started that channel.
Great storyteller.
Yeah.
Love it.
Oh, there's older videos too of him telling stories. But he just started a channel called Jawbone on YouTube. Have you seen it?
No.
Okay. You have to search it for me.
Yeah, I will pull it up.
And then we'll do some advertising for Martin.
What I really want to do is find I really want to find a way to this is it. I really want to find a way, because apparently he occasionally performs the Odyssey, and I really want to see him perform the Odyssey. That would be amazing.
Well, maybe we'll just all have to do the Skin Boat and the Star. Several of us will go to the UK for a month and a half. We'll rent an Airbnb.
Right.
Do Martin's thing on the weekend. And then we'll dance around campfires with drums during the weekend.
Maybe. Yeah.
There it is, folks.
There's a channel, Jawbone with Martin Shaw.
Yeah. Like and subscribe, everybody.
Oh, yes, we will be subscribing right here. You saw it. You saw it here first.
It's fantastic.
Look, you could be one of the early supporters of one of the greatest storytellers of our time.
Oh, yeah. And, you know, you have to know that, like, Martin has a long history of also working with other great storytellers, right?
Yep.
Robert Bly and so on. Yeah. So they're really good.
Sweet.
They're really, it's a great
recommend. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
That's exciting. Yeah, we'll definitely have to that's added to the list. That'll be on the short list.
Yeah. Well, his Substack is also wonderful because he does an audio read through of whatever he writes.
Yeah.
So I never just read Martin's Substack. I listen and read along. And apparently he said in his last Substack that he's coming to North America. I think Canada too. I think he's doing a tour with the same group from Vancouver Island that had him that time that I met him.
Yeah.
You know, I took my friend with me and I said to her, just so you know, I'm going to jump up and grab him before he disappears. I just want to say hello from Grail Country. And he didn't know me at the time. Like I hadn't talked to him before. And the reason I was doing it so spontaneously was because I heard him say that he never sticks around after a show, that he just needs to get away from the crowd. So I thought, well, I can't let that happen. I've got to grab him before he goes. And in my conversation with him, he said, yeah, I remember you because you just suddenly you're there when I was coming down the stairs. I said, oh, I know. But what was I going to say? Oh, yeah. My friend's like, wait, let me take a picture. And she's like, she took like 5 pictures of, well, I didn't even know she was taking them.
Yeah.
Of me talking to him. And then she said, can you guys turn around and, you know, take a picture? None of them turned out. I was so glad.
Yeah.
Like I don't have a phone, right? And I don't think of pictures. My kids are always after me like, Mom, you never send any pictures.
Yeah.
But she had a phone, you know, and so she was doing it, but none of them turned out. I said, oh, can you send me that picture? She goes, you know what? None of them turned out. I'm like, what? That's interesting.
Yeah.
So yeah.
That's some spirits can't be captured on film, right? Some of them are too big.
We broke the camera.
Yeah, to fit on the page, to fit on a computer chip.
I definitely want to do. I definitely want to do one of Martin's, you know, longer termy thingies.
Yeah.
At some point, because life is short, man. Got to live it.
Amen.
And there's just some things that I'm really like. When I went to Vancouver Island, I went because I bought a ticket to that venue that he was speaking at. And I had just finished reading Courting the Wild Twin, and I was like, and then, yeah, and I don't leave the vicinity of my farm very often.
Yeah.
You know?
Right.
So, yeah.
Well, you still have an invitation, Posca 2025 in the Wasatch Mountains. It's beautiful.
When is Posca?
April 20th.
20th?
Yeah, April 20th.
All right.
Yeah, Great Lent is about to start.
I'm not going to Midwestuary. I'm not
either. I'm sorry. I'm not going to make it to Midwestuary. My daughter is going to college that at that exact time. So I'll be moving her up to college. I'll be tied up.
Oh, right. The big
So
move.
yeah, that's going to be the beginning
How
of
far?
the empty nester
Yeah.
situation. So not far. She's only going, it's like an hour and a half away. So it's not bad.
Did you ever see, what movie was it? With Steve Martin and Goldie Hawn? Was it
Probably.
them? When their daughter finally goes to college or something? And then No, I'm actually thinking of Christmas with the Cranks.
Oh,
When their daughter goes to college. There was like a whole spate of movies like that in the 90s when the daughter goes to college
yeah.
and the parents are left alone with each other for the first time.
Right. You're like, oh,
It's
ooh.
a strange moment, let me tell you.
Yeah, I can anticipate it's going to be, I think it'll be mostly fine. My wife and I have settled in pretty well lately. Yeah, I don't know if I'll be able to, I'm not going to be able to make it, Joy. I'm sorry. I won't be able to make it to the Midwest area. I have to, like I said, I got to take care of my daughter. She comes first. She wins over spilling my guts to strangers. I know. I really enjoyed Northwest area. I had a great time. I thought it was really refreshing.
It was so nice to meet everybody.
Yeah, it was. It was very moving. I'm sad because I wanted to stay in better contact with a few of the people that I met there, and I haven't. And it's not, if you're listening, I promise it's not personal, but my personal life is quite intense right now and busy, and I have a lot of things I'm taking care of locally. So it's harder for me to keep my connections with people who are not local to me because I have a lot of demands on my time locally.
Yeah.
You know, I have like 10 godsons and they're all having kids, and I have, you know, and
Not
then
taking
I'm the,
on any more
I'm the
godsons.
treasurer of the parish. And if someone asks me, I do. Yeah. I mean,
Well.
that's how it is.
And then also you're doing the sound system there?
Yeah. Doing the sound system at the
Yeah.
church. I'm the treasurer of the church. And then, you know, my work life, which is not overbearing, but I'm just, it's a lot of, I just have a lot of commitments.
And this?
Yeah. And this
It
Lives the
comes
Saints.
around every week.
Yep. I actually really look forward to it.
Me too.
I'm very
Me too.
grateful
I really
for
enjoy
this
it.
project. It's been a real godsend. Yeah, glory to God. Well, and same Joy. I enjoyed meeting. I'm really glad that we met in September and that we've stayed in contact. And same with Grizz. I'm glad that we met, and many others of you that may or may not be in the audience. I've enjoyed. I enjoyed getting to know people in person. I prefer that. The internet is such a weird thing, and meeting someone over the internet is such a weird thing. Like I actually, this is weird. This. So in '97, I got home from being a missionary, and I met a girl online. We met in a chat room, IRC chat room back in the old days. No one knows what that is. That's okay. But we met in this room, and she lived in Salt Lake, and I lived in Nevada at the time. And I actually moved to Salt Lake. I never met this girl in person. I moved to Salt Lake and then just called her and said, "Hey, I live here now. Let's go out." So we went out. We dated for a few months. But what's wild to me is that at that time, especially, I was prone to building up this person in my head and then falling in love with the person in my head and then experiencing cognitive dissonance every time you meet the person in person, because they're constantly kind of like acting differently than the person in your head.
Well, they're three-dimensional, not just.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they're three-dimensional, and you see the body language, and you see their personality, and you see their patterns, and you don't have any of that. You know, we weren't even talking. We were just text chat basically, and then some talking like on the phone later, but it was just like, it's so wild. It's such a weird way of meeting someone. It's so backwards, and it's, this little corner kind of, it's a lower version. I mean, it's a similar version of that, but the problem is you think you know them better because you've seen a video or seen them in video chat. It's just not the same. It is just
Well,
not.
did I ever tell you that? Oh God.
Amen. On God.
Did I ever tell you that I used to work for a telephone answering service, like back in the day, where it was like had these
Oh
little
no.
headsets, and
Yeah.
I had a switchboard, and I had these plugs that that I had
Yeah.
to pull up and plug in, and then flick the switch and say, you know, Dr. Smith's dentist office. How can I help
Right.
you?
Yeah.
And put a little name over every hole.
Yeah.
And you're working for all the offices.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
and at the time I was just trying to make a lot of money so I could save it. And so I took all the shifts nobody wanted.
Yeah.
Like I worked through Christmas and New Year's, and I did all the sometimes I do a double shift from 3 to 11 and then 11 to 7 in the morning.
Mm. Oof.
And anyway, and it was just me in this room. And if
Yeah.
there was, we also dispatched tow trucks. So sometimes if it was winter and there was bad weather, there was lots to do. Other
Yeah.
times you're just like,
Yeah. Right.
and I'd have the radio going. And anyway, so there was a radio contest one night, and I phoned in because I knew I'd win it because I was probably the only person in the whole town who was still awake. And this is back in the day, right? Where you phoned.
Yeah, when the radio station was local.
Yeah, it was
Instead of
local.
some satellite thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and I phoned in and I won. I don't remember what it was about, but the guy's like, "Okay, just hang on. I have to get your information. I'll be right back." And he went on air, and I could hear him, right? Because the
Yeah.
radio was going. And then he comes back on. He's talking to me on the phone, and he goes, "So what are you doing up so late?" I said, "Oh, I'm working." Like
Yeah.
me. And so he was working
Yeah.
through the night, right? And so when things were really quiet for him and or for me, we would phone each other and just talk all night. And
Yeah.
then he'd be like, "Okay, just hang on." Then I'd hear him on the radio. Then he'd come back on. We'd keep talking. Anyway, I don't know how many months we did this. And it was just really collegial. Like there was no romantic thing about it at all.
Yeah.
At least not for me. And he never gave me the impression it was for him either. And then he said to me once, he goes, "I think maybe we should just have a coffee together or something. What do you think?" At a restaurant.
Yeah.
Because we got off at 7 in the morning. And I'm like, "Oh, yeah, that's an idea." So I went to meet him in this restaurant, and like I was total hippie, eh? Like I was wearing this long dress and the shawl and all the stuff.
Right.
And I come floating in,
Ah.
to the restaurant. And I could tell who he was. I'd never seen him before. And I could tell who he was because he was going, "Is that
Oh
her?"
no.
He was not impressed. Not at all. And this
Oh
was
dear.
yeah, anyway, he said all I remember is he asked me, he said, "Do you people bake your own bread?" That's what he said. And I said to him, "People?
What?
You think I belong to a tribe?"
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And that was the last time we ever spoke to each other.
Oh, that's
Isn't that
interesting.
crazy?
Yeah,
He was
that is.
just like, yeah.
Oh, never mind. Yeah. Wow. Interesting. That reminds me of a book I read. I'll share it. It's really fun. It's called Wired Love, A Romance of Dots and Dashes. This book, published in 1879, mulls how authentic a romance can be that is mediated over wire by two telegraph operators. So they were telegraph operators, and you would send messages back and forth, but you could hear the other messages that people were sending and stuff. It was kind of like a open party line, the way it worked at that time. And so she was operating there, and then she was like operating to this other town that she had never operated to, and then the guy kind of came back in a cheeky way and started like being a bit of a smart ass to her. And she was like, wait a minute, who's this? And
Yeah,
then they
yeah.
start, it's such a cute little book.
You know,
It's a really fun read.
I don't know if I'm sure other movies have played with this whole thing, but The Walking Dead really played with this too, where people would be on shortwave radios and they'd end up talking to each other, and then they'd meet up and, all hell would break loose because the person
Yeah.
was never who you thought they were,
Right.
Like, when I hear people talking about, being on the internet as something unique, I don't find it that unique, actually.
Yeah.
Telephones are just about the same. You can't even see the person you're talking to.
Yeah.
Like on an old-fashioned phone.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And yeah. So
well, the promise, I remember I saw this video the other day. It was made in the 90s, and it was just like, imagine having instant access to all of the knowledge of the history of mankind collected in one place, easily searchable, easily retrievable, movies, books. And it's just like, well, yeah, but it's also like your dumb neighbor and like all these weird people around this. It's like you just gave a bunch of monkeys megaphones, right? Like, and I'm one of them, so it's like, I don't know if this is so good, man. Not only that, but like, like, it was kind of what struck me at the time when I was watching, I just saw this the other day, it was funny, and I was just like, that's actually a really Protestant way of looking at the world, right? Like the internet, we just need to gather all of the information.
Well, it's been being done for
and then we'll just know.
Like,
then we'll just know things, like, okay, then what, right?
These libraries that the ancients had, scrolls and scrolls. I mean, they're still finding stuff in libraries they didn't even know they had.
Yeah.
And okay, so get this. I used to go, I lived with my aunt and uncle for a while when I was about 13, 14. And my uncle he was a computer programmer for a communications company in Canada. And he was responsible for the computer.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the size of a building.
Yeah.
Okay. So I would go with him to work, and there's all these tapes. Yeah. I don't even know what they're called, Jeremy, because I was like 13, 14. The whole room was full of them. And then there was this huge, monstrous box in the middle of the room, and it would spit out instructions, and he'd have to run over and change tapes and do things and close the, and then they'd be going, by themselves.
Yeah.
That was the computer.
Yeah.
And now it's like, look at this.
I know. Yeah.
I mean, well, we're a phone, right?
Yeah. No, I know, it boggles the mind.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it is. It is. Well, we're living out the the Gnostic vision, right? Like, that was the original intent of computers, was to like manifest the Gnostic worldview and to free us from our physicality, right?
Well, I mean, you were literally, my uncle was like a cog in the machine. He was in it. He was in it. Oh,
yeah, and he was the body for. He was the body for the spirit.
It was just like,
yes,
help me,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, feed me, Seymour. Right, from Little Shop of Horrors. Yeah.
Oh my gosh! Yeah, crazy.
We make all these references, so all the kids are just like, "What the hell are they talking about?" It's so fun. I hope it would be fun what would be fun is if somebody ran cliff notes on the show and like came up with references for all the stuff we're talking about.
Yeah. And then I remember when a friend of ours, he was from the States. We were living in Switzerland. It was in the 80s, and he brought us an Atari game, gave it to us.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, you're excited about this? It was a dot going dink.
Right.
Dink. Yeah. I'm like, why don't we just play it for real, like on a ping pong table? Like, why do we have to sit here with things,
Yeah.
He's like, check this out. I'm just like, what?
Is this the fun part? When does the fun start?
And then I've got the history of Nintendo in my attic. I've got Super Nintendo
Oh
and
man.
like I've got all kinds. Like I was doing it, man. Like I was there from the
Yeah.
beginning. What can I say?
I know. Same. Yep. Same. Yeah. Yeah. I'm sad I don't have my first computers. I'm sad I sold them. It's a big
Yeah,
regret.
I said to my husband, "What do I do with that Atari game, anyways?" Because it was like a little monitor.
Yeah.
It's like this little box, and yeah, crazy, crazy. And
Yeah. I'll pull up the video that I saw the other night. I'll just share the link. It's too funny. It was the nostalgia of like the 90s. I mean 90 like internet from the point of view of the 90s. Like when it
and
was
I
started.
remember when Pac-Man came out.
Oh
Okay,
yeah, yeah,
I remember
yeah. Well,
being in the
my mom was
arcade and people going nuts for Pac-Man.
yeah, my mom was working in a bar at night. Like she would work cleaning the bar during the day, so she wasn't a bartender. She just worked during the day cleaning the bar, and I would go to the bar with her, and they had asteroids,
Oh
and it
yeah.
was the arcade asteroids. And, oh man, I would play that for hours and hours. It was so fun.
Well, they actually had in the arcade and in bars, they had Pac-Man tables.
Yeah, that's what this
Remember
was.
those?
It was an asteroids table.
Oh, it was a table too. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, it was a table. It was great.
Just now people are on their phones,
I
so
know.
they don't need a whole table.
Yeah, they just sit at the phones together. I see that when I go to lunch. Like I go to a lunch
Oh,
with
it's
my
so
wife,
crazy.
and I go to lunch. I take her out. We work at the same place, so we have one day a week where we go out for lunch together. And
Mm.
whenever we go, there's always like 3 or 4 tables of people, and they're all sitting at the table together eating, and they're all just looking at their phones separately. No one's talking. It's the weirdest thing. I find it very disturbing every time. I'm just like, what are you
Well,
guys
I gotta
doing?
I gotta tell you a really old story. So we were on a road trip. I was like, I don't know, 7 or 8 or something. And we stopped at a, gas station slash restaurant. And this is in the day when you didn't have franchises. Everybody family owned these businesses.
Yeah.
The restaurants were actually pretty good. Anyway, we go in and it's just roadside travelers, stopping at this thing for food. And there's this old couple and she's got her hair in curlers. Do you remember the days?
Oh yeah.
Okay. With the kerchief over top.
Right. Yeah.
And he's sitting there and they're like this and they're staring past each other,
Yeah.
but they're face to face,
Right.
right?
Yeah. Well, that's anyone who's been married over 20 years knows that.
and then
Knows that
and
moment.
then they get up to leave and he's got this huge beer belly, eh? Like it's
Yeah.
just the beer pot.
This is sound disturbingly familiar.
And, and on his shirt it says, "My wife says I never listen to her. At least I think that's what she said." I'll never forget that.
That's funny. It's such a long shirt to read too. That's so funny.
I know.
I think
I
that's
just
part of the
thought it was
joke.
bad. Especially because I was watching them the whole time.
Yeah, right.
They didn't say a word. They ate their
Yeah.
meal and they stared past each other and then they
Yeah.
got up and they walked out. And I mean, these were the days where there was Far Side and Herman comics,
Oh, right. Yeah.
right? So they looked like they stepped right out of
Right up far side.
Herman. Far Side.
That's funny. Now I can see it because that totally fits. That's hilarious.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh
Gary Larson was way ahead of his time. Very
my
funny.
God. Did you know that his older brother used to lock him in a closet?
No.
And that's where he got all his comics.
Oh wow.
Because he'd have to keep himself sane
Oh.
because he'd be
No,
locked in there for hours and
yeah.
and in the dark. And so he would just dream up these crazy comics.
Wow.
So he thanked his brother for all the inspiration.
Being a bully.
Yeah. It makes me sad when people say, "I've never heard of Far Side." I'm just like, "No. Really?"
Oh, that is sad.
Yeah.
No, Far Side and Calvin and Hobbes, special place in my life.
I never read Calvin and Hobbes.
Oh man, it's good.
I
It's
heard
really good.
I
It holds
mean,
up. It holds up. You
it
should
does,
totally,
yeah, because
yeah, you should totally
I've seen
look
since,
it's
like,
so good.
Jason actually shared some Calvin and Hobbes stuff. Like, we'd be talking about Jason, Almontree.
Mm.
We'd be talking about something, and then he'd send me, like, this whole Calvin and Hobbes scenario, and I'd be like, "Oh my god, that's exactly it," you know?
Yeah, yeah.
They're really good
It's really
stuff.
good. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the killer, Far Sides for me was he had 2, what do you call them? 2 cartoons side by side, you know, like it was like
Mm.
he
Oh
didn't
yeah.
do strips very often, they're usually just 1 square, but he had this one was 2, and it was a bunch of cows, and they were standing around with martinis in a field,
Yeah.
you know, just kinda dotted over and in little groups of 2 and 3 and talking. And there was one cow on a hill, and it yells, "Car!" And then they're all down in the next
Nice.
grass. Oh my god, I don't know why that got me so badly, but
My favorite one was the kid who's you see there's a sign on the door that says pull, and the kid is pushing on the door, and next to it there's a sign that says the Eton School for the Gifted. That
yeah.
one always felt pretty familiar.
Yeah, and
So
then there was a I told you there was a okay. He had this couple sitting on the couch, and across from them were their invited guests, but they were zombies, so they were like, right? And the husband says to the wife, "I told you if we invited the zombies for dinner, we'd just sit around staring at each other."
there was a fun one too, where it was like a college lecture hall, and some alien sticks his head in the door into the door into the classroom, and he goes, "Whoa, wrong room."
Oh my gosh, don't even get me started. I have every Gary Larson book ever made.
It's good stuff. It's very funny.
Yeah.
Most of it holds up too. Some of it's a little like just doesn't fit the age anymore, but it's still most of his stuff's really great. But Calvin Hobbes is like timeless.
Yeah, I
Really
should
good.
actually read it because I was
Yeah.
impressed when
Yeah,
Jason
you would really like it.
shared it.
It's very good.
I was like, "This is deep,"
Yeah, there's a
you know?
lot to it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, some of it's funny, obviously, but yeah, some of it's like, oof, that one's
Yeah.
that one struck a little deep.
My
It struck a little
husband
hard.
has a whole collection of Asterix and Obelix,
No, I haven't read those at all.
and, I mean, those are very European, right?
Yeah.
Asterix and Obelix, and, but, like, he's got some from the 70s, you know, when
Oh,
he was reading those. Yeah. He loved Asterix and Obelix, and they're actually pretty funny too.
yeah, I don't know them.
It's it's all like European history, right?
Mm,
You know, the Vikings and the barbarians and you know, all the different
yeah.
tribes fighting with each other, and Asterix and Obelix are, you know, a great big fat dumb guy and then a little, I don't
Was
know.
it like Rocky and Bullwinkle?
I guess so. You know, it's a straight guy and
Right.
a silly guy, right?
Yeah. Rocky
But
and
they're
Bullwinkle. Yeah.
yeah, it's pretty much like
Right.
that. And it's very slapsticky.
Yeah, yeah. No, it really sounds like Rocky and Bullwinkle.
Yeah. Yeah.
All these references tonight. Sorry, kids. You're hearing the old people talk about stuff you've never heard of before. So here we are.
There we go. Yawn God knows them.
Oh, there we go.
I didn't even want to dare name. Yeah. 2 Gauls fighting the Romans. There you go.
Oh,
Yeah.
I see.
I
Julius
thought they
Caesar
were
made short work of them.
They have these hats with horns sticking out of them, right? I didn't read them much, but he loved them. Yeah.
I better get going. It's getting late.
Yeah.
It's time for me to retire. Actually, I
So
have
we
to go
started
for a
with
walk.
St. John Maximovitch, and then we ended with Asterix and Obelix.
You never know where we're going.
That's how
It's
this
always
goes.
an interesting journey.
Yeah. Yes. Well, thanks a lot, Jeremy, and I hope you feel better soon.
Thank you. I appreciate it. By your prayers.
Yep. And thank you, everybody else, for joining
Thanks for
us.
joining us for all the old people nostalgia.
Yeah. There you go.
Oh.
Yeah, there is a movie. Yeah. And I just wanted to say it was nice to meet you, Elgin. I've never seen you make a comment before, so welcome. Yeah. All right. Good night, all.
Good night.
See you next Tuesday.